Good afternoon. I'm happy to welcome you to this webinar, if you will, and it is entitled "The Top 3 Things to Do When You're Facing Financial Difficulty." I had a worse title on it, but they took out the dirty words. And I'd like to introduce you to somebody who's perfect for moderating this webinar, and that would be Leland Goldberg. He is a management consultant in the highest degree, that's for sure. Lee is a certified turnaround management expert, started an organization, Turnaround Management Associates, and he is also the president of a nonprofit called veterans.org, which helps veterans start and run their business successfully. So Lee, please take it away, sir.
Thank you, Cliff. Really appreciate being here. Thank you for the invite, and welcome to everybody. I'm glad you could attend. So this program is all about understanding that when we hit a financial crisis, whether it's brought about by the pandemic or the economy or what have you, so any kind of an issue that interrupts your business, there's a need for you to react. And so the 3 guest speakers that we have today all graduated from the veteran program in March of 2020, our last veteran program before our current program, which is now an online program. Dina Young, Molly McPherson, and George Jackman. And I'm going to introduce each one of them individually and have them tell you their story. Their stories all occurred shortly after graduation from the veteran program in March of 2020, when all of a sudden COVID hit. And it interrupted their business and they didn't know what they were going to do at that point. And they'll tell you the story about how they pivoted successfully. And I'm exceedingly proud of each and every one of you guys. So first, George Jackman, who is sitting in the middle of a parking lot somewhere. George Jackman is the owner of Truly Clean. It's a one-stop shop for all its customers' commercial cleaning needs. His prior experience includes 12 years in the U.S. Marine Corps. Semper Fi, George.
Semper Fi.
Then serving as the operation manager for Syncom, a national cleaning firm specializing in megaplex movie theaters. George is also an ordained minister, has started 3 churches in addition to his current business, and is a pastor in a church in New Hampshire as we speak. George Jackman, I turn it over to you. Tell your story.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me today, Lee. I appreciate it. And happy Veterans Day to everybody, and Semper Fi Marines, happy birthday. As we were coming to the closing of our Streetwise MBA and getting ready for our graduation was canceled. The original dates because COVID had broken out. And I was with my family up on a vacation. Our Disney trip was canceled that we're heading on. And the word came out that COVID struck. And so literally overnight, I lost all my residential clients, which was at the time half of my business. And so having a fully staffed company, right now we have 13 employees, right? And so having our staff and having that hit was really overwhelming in realizing that we were going to have to make some changes and adjustments. So I was driving in the car one day and I heard on the radio that the COVID virus was staying on surfaces for about 3 days. And so immediately I realized that if it sticks around for 3 days, the clients are going to require maybe more cleaning, the ones that I still had left that were considered essential. And so immediately I made phone calls to all my current clients. I upgraded to what was a medical grade disinfectant, the strongest on the market that I could have available at the time. I called the manufacturer. They told me that they use this in hospitals. They tell me that it kills HIV. So it gave me a selling point to separate me and to set me apart from all the other competition. So I immediately reached out to all my current clients and asked them if they had wanted an increase in the volume about the amount of times that our company comes in and clean them. And almost every essential business that was still opened did ask us to come in and start providing additional cleaning for them. So within 48 hours, I was going from losing half my business to now I'm starting to break even. Well, at the same time, I started doing email campaigns for all the essential businesses that were up in the New Hampshire area, uh, big corporations that had to stay open. And I started offering our services with these medical grade disinfectants to help them out. And at that point, we actually got very high level people in the companies actually started responding to me, which usually anybody in sales knows that an email campaign will never work. You really got to get on the phone and speak to somebody. And we ended up doing staffing of one of the most major facilities here in New Hampshire, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We provided 2 staff members in the morning shifts, 2 staff members in the afternoon shifts. We provided overnight staffing for them. And so we went from doing weekly to bi-weekly cleaning for our current clients to literally full-time staffing for major firms that usually we wouldn't be able to even get a seat in front of them if it actually wasn't for the pandemic, because they usually have a protocol that they require for their vendors to be chosen. And so from the moment that the pandemic struck, within 48 hours, I went from losing half my business to our business has been in business for 10 years. And I started it myself. We went from probably grossing maybe 200,000 to we're on track for 600,000 this year since the pandemic already at this point. We went from having no company vehicles to I'm purchasing my 5th vehicle on Monday, paying cash for all of our cars. With the staff, we've increased our staff numbers. So literally making a few adjustments on the spot and seeing the situation that was happening and shifting that and rechanging our focus and thinking out of the box. I think my company is now positioned at this point better than it's ever been. And we're looking at totally scaling in the future. And thankfully to our Streetwise MBA class under Lee's teaching, he was showing us a lot of ways how to make adjustments for situations like this when they came up. So I'm not sure if you have any other questions about that, but that's pretty much what happened to us.
So George, I'm just going to follow up with a couple of points that I'd like you to expand upon.
Sure.
So one of the things we teach in the program is, when you're facing a situation which is a crisis, coming to grips with the reality of that situation, right?
Yes.
And then having a positive mental attitude,
Right.
which basically allows you to take a step back and say, okay, now what the F do I do, right?
Right. Yeah,
So,
no.
Just tell us about that moment. Just tell us about that moment, George, when it was oh my God.
I was actually with my whole family, right? Because we were supposed to go to Disney and it got canceled. So we just grabbed the condo really quick. This was before it really got so bad that all the quarantining was happening. Remember at the first 2-week curve, this is when it started. And so we spent some time together. And I came downstairs and I told my wife, I'm like, man, we're in trouble. I'm like, my company is literally going to be cut in half. The phone calls just came in all day. People are calling me, we're not going to use services anymore. And it was just overwhelming, honestly. And so it's when I heard, so I was really, I'm a pastor, obviously, so I'm praying about this thing. And I'm in the, and as soon as I heard on the radio, the coronavirus appears at this point to stay on services for 3 days, that just triggered in my mind. I said, okay, that's a problem that needs to be resolved. And I think we're showing value to our customers as soon as we can solve their problems. And so honestly, I guess we're selling safety to them because we're coming in and a lot of their employees, there's a lot of fear for other companies. And so we're helping solve one of their larger problems of fear in order to keep their workplaces safe so they can still provide their jobs. And so when that moment happened, Lee, as soon as at first I honestly didn't know what to do, that until I heard that radio ad talking about coronavirus, that's when it struck. And I said, I need to use a disinfectant that is going to bring safety and security to the people that we're working for and pay that money to get the best stuff on the market and be the problem solver that will help comfort people through this process. And so, yeah, fortunately for me, I think I'm quick on my feet. And when that happened, I realized if adjustments weren't made immediately, this is going to cost something. And so after I realized this was working for my own people, I realized this is going to work for other people also that might traditionally not use cleaning companies. And so that actually, both these things panned out for me, and now since then, many of my residential clients have returned. That's not the focus or the vision of our company, but I didn't expect to. Part of my vision was to get rid of residential altogether. I didn't expect it to happen that quickly. You know, you want to kind of just drop them off a little bit as you're increasing your other business. You don't want to lose them all overnight. I mean,
Right.
I was motivated to strike on purely commercial, but not that motivated, right?
Right.
So we also increased our additional services that we had. Uh, Interesting enough, people wanted some carpet cleaning through this, you know, and we do a lot of floor work. And so we just tried increasing a little bit of what we offered and put that out there. And it just seems like it seems like I was a good fisherman. Everything I was fishing, they were biting, and it all came together. So
That's great. So George, can you hang around a little bit so we can, for Q&A?
absolutely.
All right. So I know you're sitting in a parking lot, but hopefully you can stay a little bit longer. Hopefully you won't get a ticket. So thank you, George, very much. That was great. Dina, I'm going to introduce you now. So Dina Young is the owner of Landmark Finish, along with her husband, Stuart Young. It's an award-winning custom cabinet shop located in Andover, Mass. They've been in business for nearly 20 years, serving commercial and residential clients throughout New England. Due to COVID-19, they were able to take a step back, and similar to what happened with George, they came up with an idea, and Dina will tell you about that, and were able to pivot their business to add plastic products by designing a line of clear protection barriers called Safeguards. Dina, do you want to tell us the story, please?
Thank you, Lee. Thanks for having me here today. So I wanted to share the story of our business pivot. So as you mentioned, and as George mentioned, you know, when COVID hit, we were about to graduate from the veteran program. From a business perspective, we were in the process of renovating our showroom here in Andover. We were had the plan of creating a design center here. So not only would it be a showroom for our clients to come see our cabinetry, but a showroom for local designers and contractors to come in, meet with clients, and also view our cabinetry samples as well. And so, you know, March 13th happened, which is the last Friday the 13th since today, just a coincidence. So, you know, school got canceled that day, and we shut our doors. And so, you know, we were considered an essential business. And so we had several cabinetry projects in queue. So we were still operating behind closed doors, wrapping up projects and whatnot. But we had already survived the recession of 2008 and pivoted our business at that point from high-end residential cabinetry to commercial cabinetry. So we started seeing some of the telltale signs that we were going to need to make a change in our business in order to get through this, right? And so we were watching the news one night, and we saw, you know, Stuart saw somebody getting interviewed behind a makeshift barrier. We've all seen them out there, right? In the convenience stores, you know, shower curtains, PVC pipe, everything. And he had an aha moment, and he saw that there was an opportunity there for us to pivot our business. And so we went into the shop the very next day and started brainstorming and prototyping. And so we started looking around the shop and saying, okay, what resources do we have here? What can we do? And what can we do differently with what we already have in-house? And we are all CNC automated here. And so we realized that our machines don't care if they're cutting wood or plastic. And so Stuart started prototyping right away. We had some plexiglass in the shop left over from an old commercial project that had been sitting on the shelf for probably a couple of years. And just went at it with, you know, the design software that we run, and started making some scaled models. And at that point, we reached out to Lee, and also to our mentor through the veteran program, who was out on furlough. And she actually came on board and helped us with our initial sales effort, which was fantastic. So we, you know, we really kind of focused in and said, okay, who do we sell these to? Because at that point, we felt like we could sell this to anybody, any kind of business. And so we really kind of dialed in and started looking at essential businesses. And so we decided to start with pursuing banks. And within a matter of literally just a few weeks of prototyping, getting it to market, we had landed our first large sale, and that was to Bangor Savings Bank. So they purchased more than 200 units at that point. They were putting them throughout all of their branches, all 57 branches throughout New England. And then that really that was the pivotal point for us that I think gave us the confidence that we really have something here that we can really run with, and we can actually grow. And we felt like it was a much more scalable business than our custom cabinetry business. So, so we continued to, push forward, and we started first looking at our own internal network. So who are our existing client base? Who can we call? Who do we know needs this and we can sell to? And we wound up reaching out to Boston College. We had done a number of cabinetry projects for them over the years, and we're actually both alum as well. And so we reached out to them. And at first they thought, oh, we're going to do this ourselves in-house. And they called us about 2 weeks later and said, we can't handle this. How can you help us? And so we had that opportunity to get in there and show them our product, our safeguards. And so we wound up ultimately outfitting all of the campus of Boston College and also Brandeis University over the summer. And then we really started focusing on schools and reaching out to our local school districts, landing a few local school districts around here, Andover, North Andover, which was really great. And so we've been taking the approach of kind of growing this from like the core out. So we've really been focusing on our backyard at this point and New England, and now we're getting ready to grow it to a larger scale. So we've been doing some work on sales and marketing and branding, and we found out that somebody else is also selling a product called Safeguards. And so I was filling Lee in earlier that we have joined forces with, again, one of our business mentors through the VETRN program referred us to some creative people, and we're working with them to rename our product, rebrand it, and we feel like this is the right time to do that before it gets too big. We're small enough at this point that we can do that almost seamlessly, I feel, and just kind of update our existing client base. And then really kind of take it to the next level. So it's really exciting. We've been very lucky to be very, very busy for the last 8 months. We never lose sight of that. And so, as we share this story with people, they say, oh, that sounds so easy. Like, how did you do that? But it was challenging along the way. I have to say, we had to source new materials that we had never sourced before. We had to learn how to market a product that we had never sold before to a client base that we didn't know. And so we're doing a lot of learning as we go. And, there's been an incredible discovery process along the way. So I guess my advice to other business owners who are kind of struggling right now and not sure what to do would be, for us, having the mentors was instrumental. I mean, it was reaching out to people who have expertise that you don't have is an incredibly valuable resource. So we've reached out for help with just general business strategy. We've reached out for help with sales and marketing. And it's really been a big help for us. So those connections that we've made in the last year or so have really, really changed the course of the business. And the other thing too is, taking advantage of these resources, like this webinar, and, there's a lot of webinars going on, and investing in yourself and that self-education, because, Stuart and I find that there's always something to learn. And it really helps in the process of staying positive. George was saying that earlier, it's so easy to just freak out and not know what to do. But if you can kind of take that step back, think outside the box and don't be afraid to do something that you haven't done before. I was talking to a woman earlier this week that runs a veteran magazine, and she was talking about how, you know, a lot of veterans are very proud and they don't want to ask for help, but you know, getting the awareness out about these programs like the veteran program or webinars and programs offered through, you know, Small Business Development Center and the SBA, it's just critical because there is help out there for us business owners. It's just a matter of spreading that awareness and taking advantage of it.
So thank you so much, Tina. So one of the great things about what VETRN offers, what the SBA offers, what the SBDC offers, all of these services of the kinds of resources you're talking about, right? That you're not alone, that there are people out there who are there to help you. And all you need to do is just understand that if you're going to be able to be successful, take advantage of that, right? The mentorship, the professional resources, the networking, that's key to being able to have the ability to say, oh my God, I'm not doing this for myself, and have the courage to take a step back and say, okay, now what do I do? And then figure out a way to pivot and do it. So thank you so much, Tina.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So now I'm going to introduce Molly McPherson. Last but not least, Molly. Molly is probably one of the best public speakers I've ever encountered in my professional career. So Molly McPherson is a PR certified communicator and speaker. Molly McPherson is the owner of Molly McPherson and Associates. Molly McPherson combines her knowledge and emerging communication practices with years of news and crisis management experience to help organizations manage issues from bubbling to a full-blown crisis to ensure they emerge with their reputation intact as a crisis manager. Molly, tell us your story. You're on mute, Molly.
Here I'm one of the best public speakers ever, and I didn't even realize that I was on mute. Thank you so much, Lee. Oh my goodness. Hello, everyone. I hate to be third because to follow the success of George and Dina, but I love it because being in the veteran course with them, we all had such disparate types of jobs and industry and businesses, and to all come together, but we all had something, you know, universal, which was solving a problem when the coronavirus hit. As Lee mentioned, I do work as a public speaker, and a very poor business decision I made heading into 2020. I have 4 teenagers, and my time is my most important commodity. And I thought 2020 would be the perfect year to really focus on my keynote speaking, because that's where I received the most profit for the least amount of effort. I felt energized by it. I really loved doing it. And it was just one day as opposed to, you know, traveling for longer bits of time and working on these bigger plans. So I thought, this is brilliant. 2020 will be my year. And it was great so far. I mean, coming off the veteran program, you know, towards the end of it, my business was better than it ever was. And I couldn't go to our last meeting because I was speaking at an annual conference on stage in a ballroom, in a hotel ballroom in New Orleans, and about crisis management, what I do. And that talk, I just felt great. But I also knew in the back of my mind that this virus was going to be an issue. I work in crisis management. I had a number of years working for FEMA. I knew a disaster when it was coming and when it was going to be big. And no one else around me at that time felt that way. Even when I was in the French Quarter and I was squished with all these people, and I would mention the virus, people would say, no, you know, it's nothing. But like Dina and like George, there I was a week later, and my business was gone. It evaporated, you know, just in a matter of days. And I looked at it, and having teenagers, I looked at 2 days went by and I said, an entire college education was lost, you know, in just a matter of hours, you know. So it was an incredibly stressful time. But interestingly enough, and I don't even know what I can attribute it to, I wasn't afraid. I had all the confidence in the world that I could pivot to something because I knew my goal was to remain in control. And that is important for anyone facing any type of crisis or issue, or even if you're an entrepreneur and you want to start a new business. What is a business where you can stay the most in control? And for me, I knew it was training and speaking and just helping people. So I had a lot of workshops that I would do, a lot of things that I could do online. The very first step that I made is I created a community. So I took all my resources that I had, I put them online, quickly put another section of my website, and I created a COVID-19 communication resource kit. And I tapped into a market that I did work with, and those were communicators who did not know the first thing about communicating through a pandemic. I also was a head of communications for the cruise line industry in Washington, D.C. I was serving as a military spouse. So we were down in Washington, D.C. And during that tour, I was working for the cruise lines with a lot of other people that were, former military, former Coast Guard. But I had experience working with a virus that went rampant, the neurovirus. And I had to write crisis plans about how you handle a virus on a cruise ship. Well, what do you know? Now here we are, years later, experiencing the same thing. When I worked at FEMA, coming out of Hurricane Katrina, working at an agency that was reviled. We were like the joke agency in Washington, D.C. In those two jobs, what was the connector in both, and my lesson learned is using the public and what the public needs and what they want to hear is what you want to tap into. You don't want to get caught up in the mainstream media. You don't want to get caught up in the noise that tells you the no. Your answer can be found if you are solving a problem for anyone. You are going to be able to be successful. And that's what I did. So I created a COVID-19 kit for communicators. I knew they were struggling with communicating with their stakeholders, with their customers. How do we reach in a virtual environment? People who had to do things in person and events, how do we communicate this online? The benefit is not only was I able to make new connections, I built a community which supported a podcast that I had. I had a podcast for a year at that point. Well, a lot of my podcasts were about COVID-19 and I was asking more people to come on. Well, then I saw my podcast numbers increase. Well, then I saw, because I was putting so many things online, there was a need to take my workshops, my trainings, and putting them online. I'd say probably the smartest thing I did was recognizing that this pandemic was going to be here for a while, and that people were going to need to figure out how to do things online. So I quickly put everything online, and I was able to not only sustain my business, but build it in another area that I love. So I was able to not give into the fear, but control. So no matter if you want to start a new business or if you're in a time of strife like right now, always aim for control and how you can maintain that, control your business. And how you do that is by solving a problem. Always look for the problem that you solve. George told you what his problem was, is he, like me, he lost everything, but he fit a need for industrial. Dina did the same thing. People were coming into the workshop. No one can come in anymore. She provided something. People did not have their protection up there. Whenever I see any type of barrier, I did my Peloton the other day, and they have on the Peloton bike, they had a shield, and I immediately thought of Dina. I was solving a problem by giving people training because they still needed it, helping people give webinars, helping people with a crisis. After the COVID crisis, we went right into diversity crisis in June. So I was able to work with people through that. So for all of you who are thinking about starting a business or trying to pivot on their business, go to the problem, find the problem that you can solve for someone, and you do it with communication. George didn't find email was terribly helpful. It's something for me. I find it to be helpful because my audience is online. So go where your people are, the people who need you. Where do they sit? Do they sit on social media? Do they read magazines? Are they newspaper readers? Whatever it is, put yourself in front of them and what their needs are. And if you do that, you will find success. And if you are passionate about what you do, which I am, there's no way that you can fail, but you just have to follow a business model that works for you. And that is solving a problem.
So Molly, what's the status of your book?
Oh, thank you so much for mentioning it. It's coming out soon. It's called Indestructible: How to Strengthen a Reputation That Can Weather a Social Media Storm. The benefit of being in the final stages of that book in March is I was able to work with the publisher because I said, I got to write about COVID-19. I got to be the only crisis book about COVID-19. And then George Floyd happened in Minneapolis at the end of May into June. And then racial, then there were a lot of digital PR crises around racial incidents. I said, I have to wait again because now I have to put that in the book, but it's going to be coming out soon, George. So I appreciate it. For Lee for mentioning it. So I appreciate it.
All right, great. Let us know.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Molly and Dina and George. Anybody then, if you have any questions, now is the time. We'd be happy to take questions. Anybody? Is there any questions in the chat room, Cliff?
I think I'm the only one chatting.
Nobody has any questions?
Cine, come on, you know you got questions, folks. This is a safe environment.
All right, so what I'm going to do, George, if there's no questions, I'm going to take you through my presentation.
You do have a question. Marie asked a question.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, we got questions coming in.
All right, hold on for a second. Let me get out of this.
Oh yeah, for Deanna.
Dina, how did you determine pricing?
So pricing, we came up with, I would say first we looked at other things that were on the market. So for example, we knew that people could go on Amazon or WB Mason, we thought about what vendors they might already have existing relationships with. But we consciously priced ourselves above those because we didn't want our product to be viewed as a commodity. We wanted it to be viewed as adding value that the other standard clear protection barriers don't. So I would say we definitely did a little bit of experimenting in the beginning. We did work with our business mentor that helped us with sales. She had an extensive background in sales and marketing. So we kind of bounced ideas off of her as well. But we started out with what we could find online, and then we just kind of valued what we felt like we brought to the table, and it kind of added a premium on top of that. And I would say that there might have been a couple of weeks of tweaking, but other than that, we pretty much found a price point that we felt we were comfortable with the profit margins, and the customers were willing to pay really without question.
We have another, great, thank you. Thank you very much. We do have a more question from Marie. What sources are out there for business owners to bounce ideas off? Here we are.
SBDC.
That's us, Massachusetts Small Business Development Center, SCORE, Lee, me. There are a lot that, I wrote on here in the chat, Proverbs 15:22. I've said that for about 19 years now. Reach out to somebody, reach out to experts. I built a $22 million business. I went from $1 million business I built it to $22 million. I learned a lot. Look at the scars. I mean, I won't, I won't let you make those same mistakes.
So Cliff, why don't you deal with the questions?
Could I follow up for Marie?
Okay, go ahead.
Please do.
Some advice. So Marie, you had asked, is there any other sources out there to bounce ideas off? Is certainly in person and networking is going to help you, but knowing the field that you're in, I just looked you up. If you're in the creative field, if you're in any areas where there's an entrepreneurial kind of vibe and spirit behind it, I would highly recommend that you follow podcasts, because podcasts create these almost micro communities. And some of these podcasts will have Facebook groups, or they'll have other resources that they can give you. I find so much knowledge for people who are willing to put their stories out there. There's so much learning there. So I would definitely tap into that as well.
Cliff, do you want to, any other questions?
Looking for them. Annie, you see any out there? Ann
Yeah.
found that one for me.
Dennis is asking one about the PPP loan or CARES Act or
Did any of the business owners use CARES Act loans like PPP or EIDL loans? Who wants to respond to that one?
I'll only go first because Lee, I have to tell you this. I'm so excited. This is straight from VETRN. Okay, so not only did, it's interesting, I work in crisis management, and one of the issues that came up were my clients who were taking out the PPP loan. And the question was, are you taking it out for the right reasons? Is it really going for payroll? And there was a concern there because it became a crisis when we heard of stories and companies and Ruth Chris, stories like that. What are you using the PPP loan for? But I was able to use it for a small business, but I also learned through just this network, thankfully, that the state where I live in Maine had special economic development programs out there. And I was able to get a grant just from applying to the state of Maine. And I never would have known about that had I not been a part of this network right now. So utilizing this was incredibly helpful.
Thank you, Molly. Dina?
Thank you, Mo.
We also, we had a PPP loan as well, which I'm hoping will be forgiven in full, because it was, we're a very small company. So I believe we fall down in that threshold where it will be forgiven. I just haven't gone through that process. It was definitely helpful to cover, payroll and the mortgage on our building and whatnot in those first few months. I'm curious to see if there's going to be another round of that coming along.
George? You're on mute, George.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I didn't think I was going to need it, but my accountant told me, George, you're not going to get a better deal than this at all. Fill out the paperwork and do it. And so I did it, and thank God I did it, because all of a sudden my clients who have always traditionally paid on time weren't paying, and it was so many financial difficulties out there. Without it, I probably would have folded. And so it was able to carry me through to hit my payrolls. And I know that's not the complete intention for it, but that's what I used it for, besides my bank money that I had also borrowed. So a lot of my companies just now recently started catching up, but I needed that plan in order to hit payroll. Because my payroll, I mean, when you go from doing jobs to full-time staffing, it's a whole different ballgame, and in order to have that access to the cash to pay my staff. So it was huge for me. I also wanted that some of these things allowed me, part of my scaling that happened during this recently, I just hired we narrowed down our market, also realizing that some industries had a greater need for us than others. Just wanted to add to some of the shifts before. And so I actually hired companies that are now doing marketing for us, full time, so that we can target those industries that would be able to use us. So it's good. It was nice to be able to have that cash flow available to scale and grow. And Lee, I remember when we first started the class with you, I said, I'm not comfortable borrowing any money from anybody for anything.
Right.
And you kept saying, you have to borrow if you want to scale. And even though you kept saying it, I couldn't hear it. And when this happened, I heard you loud and clear.
Thank you, George. At least something stuck.
A lot of
Thank you.
stuff.
We do have another question, and Dina, Molly, and George can probably pitch in on this. It's from Mickey, and he says, how did you start to reach out to the veteran? What help did you ask for?
So I think each one has a different answer. I know Dina.
Yeah, I know.
I know Dina found out about us through the chamber, right?
Yeah, so we found out about the program through our Merrimack Valley Chamber of Commerce. And it was funny because I was not at work yet that day and Stuart was. And we literally emailed it to each other at the same time. We have to take advantage of this opportunity because, I don't know that it's been stated, but the veteran program is free to participants. And so it's a 6-month program where you're learning all of this business strategy, how to understand your financials, how to communicate, all the, thinking about legal issues and HR issues. I mean, it's a tremendous amount of knowledge, and to get that free of charge is unheard of. So thank you to Lee and thank you to the SBA, because I mean, honestly, it's been such a resource for us in our process.
You can thank Ray Milano. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Ray.
How about you?
When people would ask me about the program and what I was participating in, because I was telling everyone what I was doing, I would explain it as it's like an MBA, but instead of learning about other people's businesses, you're running your own business through your learning. And I can say the biggest change in my business came from running through this veteran program. The business that I brought in on day one was completely different from the business that I had when it came to an end. That even though it was bad for us that COVID hit, it was almost beneficial. There's a reason why you were listening to 3 people who are a part of the veteran program who were able to pivot, because we were at the end of that program. And all 3 of us, I can speak for Dina and George, having heard their stories and they heard my story, we all tapped in to the places where we needed to, that we had just learned in the weeks previous to that. Mine being, George mentioned it. Mine was Lee always saying cash is king, cash is king, cash is king, that you want to be able to have capital moving forward. But I learned about it through the Chamber of Commerce in Portsmouth and never regretted it.
George, how did you hear about it?
Yeah, I have so much to say about this. When I applied for the program, one day my son calls me and he said, "Hey, Dad, they're offering a free master's program for people that have served in the military. And I thought it was a scam. So, I said,
Nothing is for free, right?
nobody gives you anything for free, right? And I mean, I love the Marine Corps. I served 12 years, but the season I got out, I always would say I got a tie clip at the end of 12 years of service. And it just seemed like, and I'm not going to say it was bitter, but I would say that, I didn't really appreciate, generally speaking, at the time, a lot of people in society didn't seem to really care about the veterans. They didn't really seem to care. Specifically where I live, I remember hearing people they're kind of cold toward guys that were going to war and everything else. And so that left me a really bad taste after serving for 12 years. And it just seemed like there was nothing really out there that I was at least aware of, for serving. So when my son told me this, I looked it up and I couldn't believe it. I said, it looks real. And that's when I reached out to yourself, Lee. And Lee read me the riot act about the expectations of this program if I was going to get into it, because I had all these spot races set up. Remember, Lee? And you were telling me, hey, this is a serious program. I'm like, Lee, I'm a serious guy. If I commit to it, I'm going to do it. And so when I got into the program, one of the greatest benefits I think I received quickly is I thought I was the only person that seemed to be psychotic, like working 7 days a week half the time, around the clock, all hours of the night, trying to do whatever it took and dealing with just issues that were just insane. And when I started sitting down with all these other veterans and hearing about the challenges that they have, their staffing problems sometimes, how difficult it might have been in recruiting, turnover rates, I felt like I was part of a community for the first time, because I've basically been doing the business myself. I didn't have any real mentors, anybody to look out to at this time. And this program also brought me together with another group in New Hampshire with veterans. And so this network was incredibly encouraging for me to know that other people have been here, or they've gone through it. They could share stories. They could share how they overcame obstacles. I don't think you can put a price tag on that when you realize you're not the only one in it. And so one day I'm in Bedford with all these very successful, high-ranking officers. I have a PhD, plain high school diploma, right?
I never heard that one. I love it.
So I'm with all these like high-ranking like officers and successful business people, and I'm sitting here in this meeting, and I'm in school at the time, in the Streetwise MBA, and this guy pulls me aside. He says, George, and by the way, this program provided an amazing mentor that has just taken me under his wings, that has been huge in the success of my company, Mark Vichora. I mean, I call him boss because he's just so intelligent. He knows everything, right? And he is just so into me. He's actually starting to mentor my son now, who's in my company. And so one day I'm with Mark and this huge group of high-ranking guys and successful business people. And someone comes up to me and says, George, if you really want to be successful, he goes, you got to check out this program that the veterans put on. I think it's like this really intense MBA course, right? And these are very educated people telling me this. And I'm like, I'm in the course now. It's actually an amazing course. And you're right. And so what I'm trying to say with this is, this course is known about even within the ranks of highly educated people that are successful. So you really can't put a price tag on and I've been trying to convince other veterans I run into, make the time, because I think every one of us as business owners are extremely busy, and in my case, I'm pastoring multiple churches, doing work overseas with orphans in multiple countries. The last thing I needed to do was take away a Saturday, but it was the best thing I ever did. And your mentorship, Lee, has been amazing, and David has been incredibly helpful. And thank you, Ray. Thank you guys for putting all this on. It was the best thing I did.
Thank you, George. So, Cliff, I didn't mean this to be an announcement or an endorsement of the veteran program, but thank you so much for letting me do that.
Well, I did mean for it to be an announcement for the veteran program. So we're right in unison here because it's a fabulous program. And thank you all. Thank you, Lee. Thank you, the three participants, Molly, Dina, George. Thank God you got online, George, your character. I loved it. Thank you so much for everybody. And thank you, everybody, for participating. Any questions, any further questions Annie, see any more questions? I got Annie texting me in the background here saying, hey, you missed a question. See, I told you without her, I'm in deep trouble. I think we got all the questions. Anybody else? You can unmute yourself and just ask your question. You don't necessarily have to chat. These are great questions. These really bring out the program to us. So
Cliff, you need to explain CFIY, TMIY, whatever you put in the chat. People need to hear that.
I've been hoping to God, and it had to be one of us that asked me. All right. Yeah. So cash flow. George, you mentioned cash flow and how important it is. So
Yes.
I'm up at the MIT Enterprise Forum about 10, 12 years ago. The Enterprise Forum is someplace that it's an accelerator more than an incubator, and they turn out over 100 businesses a year. Obviously, it's a great program, MIT. I know I studied electrical engineering there about 100 years ago. And the director puts up the award CFIMITYM, and he says, let me tell you something. That is the single most important thing to a business, to its survival, especially in the nascent, the beginning stage. CFI, MIT, YM. And I have been saying it for now 12 or 15 years. CFI, MIT, YM. Most important thing, George, you're absolutely right.
What is
Stands
it?
for, I was hoping somebody'd ask Lee, stands for cash flow is more important than your mother.
What?
I had one lady say to me, that's like, has no son, is putting mothers on a very high pedestal. Unless she's rich, if she can't write you a check, then cash is more important. You can stay in business, you got enough cash. And
Oh,
if you go coming in faster than your gazotas go out, that's mine, you're gonna survive. And that was
Yeah.
the beauty of PPP. It gave people an influx of cash. I even said to PPP, I did dozens and dozens of PPP. Look at, even if it isn't all forgiven, it's cash. You're going to survive. It's a 1% loan. Most of it will be forgiven, but take the money.
So I see that John Larned and John Denny were two also graduates of the veteran program are on. John, either John, would you like to say something about your experience? John Larned? John Denny?
Probably have to unmute yourself, gentlemen. Lower
don't-
left.
They might not be able to.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is John Larned.
Hey,
Hey.
John.
I've just been diddling around with how to mute myself. I just second what everyone has said. I've said to Lee, I've faced every problem known to man in this development of my business. And so I consider myself a resource to anyone who would need it. But two things. One, our network is terrific. Two, just what you said, Cliff, on the PPP. When I got that money, it was approximately April 1st, and I was just beginning to get shaky about the future. And somehow just the fact of getting that money took the pressure off. And I'm so impressed with all the stories I've heard. I wish I had a great story to tell you. My story is great that I have not suffered through the COVID time, but my thing has been all luck. Things fell in place. Some business we had pursued in the transportation field just took off because of COVID. And so I was just very lucky. But the PPP came in at a time when I needed something to buck me up, something to give me confidence. And that's the purpose that it served for me. The other thing, and Mr. Ray Milano helped with this, and I discussed it with Lee, I had fear and trepidation around getting the EIDL. And the fear was, oh, they're going to run out of money before I get it. I'm not going to have the right kind of paperwork. I'm going to not have good balance sheets, and I'm not going to have the kinds of things that I need, and I'm going to blow it on the idol. And the funny, amazing thing that happened to me with the idol is I believed that I was in the application process. And I discussed it with Ray Milano. I discussed it with Lee. And before I even knew what was happening, I had been approved for a significant loan. And what happened to me is I got into the office on a Monday, and my assistant, we're all working remotely, my assistant called me and said, John, there's this amazing amount of money in our bank account. Where did it come from? And I said, Jenny, what do you mean? And I won't disclose the amount because it's private, but it's like mortgage money, and like a mortgage. And she says, John, this money's in the PNC account. And I looked at it and I said, gosh darn it.
Maybe they made a
I
mistake.
thought I was in the application process, and we've already got the loan.
Wow,
So
that's
it
great.
was magical, and it has helped me out tremendously for things like someone else mentioned. I think it was George. Customers are paying slow. I had dealt with a significant problem 2 years ago, and that was the Chinese tariff. And that threw me for a loop. And so we'd moved a significant amount of business out of China into India. And the Indian partners were pretty good, and we had a lot of back and forth on terms. And while things were good, they gave me open terms. But the minute that COVID hit, even though business and agreements were already in process, these guys said, oh, if you want this stuff to ship, you've got to pay now. We're not even going to produce it for you unless you pay now. And I said, holy, I don't have the funds. Well, suddenly I had the idle money, and I was able to pay the Indian suppliers.
Wow, great story, John.
And anyway, on and on it went. That's my story. And
Great
thanks for
story.
giving me an opportunity.
Great story, John. Thank you. Good job. John Danahy, do you want to say a couple words?
Well, you know me, Lee. I'm hardly ever shy, but I'm definitely multitasking and not succeeding at anything right now. So, yeah. So as I put in the chat box, I can't say enough great stuff about what you've done, Lee, for me, helping me with my businesses now. Since so I'll just rewind a little bit. Lee and I had a brief conversation a couple years ago. He kind of explained to me how screwed up I was. I didn't believe him because I had an MBA, and why would I ever need to go back to school to learn how to run my business? Because after all, I've done that at the master's level. And well, it was a humbling experience being in the classroom with him, but the resources that he pulls together really does help get you to the point where you can, understand your financials, understand your marketing, understand your business, understand yourself. I think probably one of the more important things in the program is actually coming to terms with who you are and what you do well and how that makes you different than everybody else. And I think as a veteran, it's really hard to speak about that confidently, especially if you've been in any kind of leadership position within the military, because at least I'll talk to the enlisted ranks in the Army, but we're taught to be fairly humble, and we all have to accept some certain amount of responsibility for failure, not necessarily the success. So, modesty is definitely not something that works well in the business community. And I think that that's one of the things that I learned.
Yeah, great. Thank you,
as a
John.
result of the program.
Thank you.
And in that process, I learned that, there's some things that make me very much different than everybody else I've met. And that's why I'm starting a second business with yet another student of Lee's in this current cohort. So no better endorsement from me to say I learned a lot in this class, and my business partner, who happens to be the father of a veteran, is also now currently enrolled, and hopefully with any luck will graduate and we'll get on with the with our order of business. So thank you, Lee. Thank you, Ray Milano. Thank you, MSBDC, SBA, SCORE, you name it. There are many resources out there. And if you don't try to take advantage of it or leverage it, I think you're going to find that you're doing it the hard way.
Thank you, John.
Thank you,
That's
John.
it, Cliff. I think we're out of time.
I think we just ran out of time.
See, I told you, I'm not shy.
You're right, Lee. You're right, Lee. John, you're absolutely right. So again, thank you. Thank you very much, everybody, for your attendance. Thank you to the speakers. Thank you to Lee for putting this on. I think this is great. And I mean that sincerely. This is excellent. I think we got to do this again, Lee.
All right, Cliff. We'll have to figure out another group though. These
Oh, yeah.
guys talk too much.
No, they talk. I could listen to them a lot longer. I wish we had 2 hours.
I
I'd
was
keep
gonna
them
say, that's
talking.
always an option, right? We extend the end time.
Keep
on
going,
this.
John. Keep going. We got another minute and a half here.
We have other success stories we can share as well, but these guys are great. You guys are great. Thank you so much. And
They work at it.
I think the one message that comes out of all of this is what I was going to say as part of my presentation as well, is that, when you come to grips with the reality of what's happening, it's really important that you have a positive mental attitude. You take a step
Absolutely.
back.
Yep.
Take a step back and say, okay, now what do I have to do to pivot? What do I have to do to make a change? Because if I don't do anything, not doing anything is a decision. And so you've got to be able to take control of the situation, figure out what it is you need to do in order to be able to respond to your customers' needs. Call your customers, talk to them, ask them, what their needs are. How can you be helpful? You're there to service them. They need it. And you can be helpful to them, and that'll also help you make your pivot. And then the last thing is just basically taking the action to stabilize your business. Cash flow, cash flow, cash flow. Put together a 13-week cash flow plan. Figure out how much cash you need to stabilize your business to get through the crisis period, and then figure out, okay, now that I've got a stabilized business, what then do I need to do to pivot my organization to grow, and where is that financing going to come from? And every step along the way, the SBA is there for you, the VETRN program is there for you, the SBDC is there for you, and all these resources, SCORE is there for you. All these resources are there. You just have to understand that you're not doing this by yourself. And as long as you have the ability to wake up to the reality of what's going on and learn from it and pivot, then you'll be fine. That's it, Cliff. I'm done.
Sounds like it, Lee. Thank you. Thank you, Lee. Thank you again, all the guests and the speakers, and I really appreciate it. This was fabulous. It's recorded. Watch it again. I think you'll enjoy it. I'm going to watch it again. All right. So thank you very much, and
Thank you.
have a great day, and be safe, folks.
All right. Thank you, Molly.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
Dina. Thank you, George.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
From Starship Enterprise, in case you didn't recognize where I am.
It's funny.